All right, good afternoon, everyone. We will get started with our November 13th, 2024 Taxicab Advisory Committee meeting. Clerk, if you'd please begin with calling the roll.
Members, please select your here on the tablet. Chair, we have a quorum with 10 members present, 6 members absent.
All right, thank you. Let's get started with non-agenda public comment, please.
Izzy Ayala, please make your way to the podium.
Hello, my name is Izzy Ala. I'm the CEO of Flywheel Technologies and Flywheel Radio Dispatch. As you know, a few months back, we launched Flywheel here in San Diego with our partnership with Uber, and we've been pretty busy. A lot of drivers have come to our platform. It looks like they're making a lot of money, a lot of revenue, which is great. This is what we want to see. The one ask that that we have and Uber would support is if they could have drop-offs to the airport. So all we need is the airport authority to say, let's give it a shot, a pilot, if you will, and to have us turn on Uber referred rides into a drop-off at a taxi, not pickup, but drop-off. So that's what that's the main common request that we're getting from all the drivers here. It does unlock a lot of rides for these guys. And so that's something I think we've done it in other markets, in other airports. And I mean, there might be some concerns, and I'm willing to kind of discuss and how we could work through those concerns, but it's been successful in the markets that we've launched this partnership with. So thank you.
Carolyn Reynolds, please make your way to the podium.
Good afternoon, board, staff, and Mr. Elo Rivera. Congratulations on your reappointment. We appreciate your leadership. I just wanted to bring a couple of points forward as we move ahead with new policies and programs. One is that the drivers who have invested in this industry have concern about their autonomy as a cab industry. They entered this marketplace because they intended to be cabs, and the push toward creating an environment where they have to take Uber calls, where they are becoming a subset of Uber, is concerning to them. Additionally, I think from a city standpoint, one should be careful because the cabs are a unique entity. They provide services that Uber does not, especially for those who are low income, disabled, and they provide that type of service where the Uber does not address that. There have been times during the pandemic where cabs were called upon to rescue people in the middle of the night who were seniors and couldn't get to their destination because their flights were late and their MTS buses were canceled. There are situations where they provided essential service during the pandemic for hospitals, trying to take people home that were on voucher programs. We just want to make sure that that the city considers that the cab industry provides a foundational transportation system. So as we move forward, even though we recognize that the industry must remain relevant, we just want to make sure we have a measured approach to transition. Thank you.
Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm going to be making a lot of public comments today because I was supposed to be an alternate, but there was a technicality. I have a website, sd.cab, where for today's meeting, I've put up a lot of good information to help with this meeting. The point for non-agenda public comment that I want to mention is that many of the items on the committee used to be action items. I was on this committee in 2011. My father was on this committee, I think the first time in 91 to 93. And we used to have everything be an action item, and now everything's an informational item. And in order to respect the process on this committee, I believe items should come back as action items. I'm going to speak to it at the budget. Specifically, we used to have a finance subcommittee. It was a standing subcommittee which would review the budget. Yesterday, I filed appeal against MTS for the fees that were being charged, and I'll talk more about that in the next item. But if we had a finance subcommittee like we used to have, where the budget was approved, we wouldn't have to go through an appeal hearing and hopefully not a lawsuit in order to get to the right budget and right fees. So I'd ask that if you can stop right there. Today, everything is informational, and if you can go up a little bit more, we used to have, I brought up another meeting where everything used to be action item, possible action item. So I'd like that to come back. And the remaining time that I have, I just like to say with the GPS, privacy has to be respected with GPS. That's a big requirement that's coming up. Everyone who's with airport dispatch, the privacy is respected. But if we're checking GPS, it should have been at the annual inspection. The timing and the procedure of MTS has not been good this year. As great as MTS is, but their timing and their procedures have not been great. When they're checking, please respect privacy with GPS because it's, oftentimes people's.
Your time has expired. Horacio Sanchez, please make your way to the podium.
Hi, my name is Horacio. I'm operations lead for Flywheel Technologies here in San Diego. Pleasure to be in front of you today. I just wanted to go ahead and make a quick comment. A lot of our drivers are coming to me about airport drop-offs. That seems to be the #1 concern that we have today. Being able to drop off at the airport through the Uber services. Again, we do have a great relationship with Uber. They're willing to work with us here with the airport to make sure that this is something we can accomplish. We're currently working with them with other airports, and we have a lot of goodwill from Uber to be able to work with us and get our drivers those trips. It's a benefit for the customer and the driver. When the customer is able to take an Uber trip into the airport, the taxi driver is able to then service taxi trips out of the airport. Meaning that they can expand their service areas. We have a lot of drivers that kind of stay around the airport. We know that customers are not all around the airport. So if we're able to get those trips expanded out, extend the service area, it's definitely a benefit for the customers we're currently serving with our taxi service. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
All right. Thank you for those who provided non-agenda public comment. Our next item will be item 3, which is approval of minutes. It's the May 22nd, 2024 Taxicab Advisory Committee minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. We've got a motion from David, a second from Antonio. Anybody wish to make any comments? Minutes? Do we have public comment?
We do not, but Chair, could we have a minute? We have a technical difficulty that we can resolve in a second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, we'll pause.
Thank you, Chair. We're ready.
All right, so we've got a motion on the, well, first, let's ask if there's any public comment on the minutes. There's no public comment. We've got a motion from Mr. Taysom, seconded by Mr. Waso. We'll do a voice vote for approval of the minutes. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing no opposition, that passes unanimously, and the minutes from May 22nd have been approved, which will move us to item 4, our fiscal year 2025 amended budget forecast. Gordon, if you'd like to proceed, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Gordon Meyer. I'm the manager of financial planning here at MTS. I wanted to provide an overview of the FY25 operating budget, as well as a look at some of the changes that we're expecting moving towards the FY25 mid-year amended budget. Just to give an overview of the presentation. So I wanted to remind everyone that the For-Hire Vehicle Administration is a self-funded entity, meaning it must cover its own operating expenses with its own operating revenues or contingency reserves. I also wanted to review the FY25 operating budget expense and revenue assumptions, as well as any changes that we see since the original forecast was adopted in June of 2024. And then I also wanted to provide an update on the contingency reserve balance and the projected usage for FY25, and then also take a look at a 5-year forecast so we can see where the department is headed, and a look at what we think is coming down the pipe for the fee schedule as well. So getting into the operating revenues for the department. So here on the table on the top, you can see there's 3 main columns to the left. So the FY24 actual, that's our actual experience for this last fiscal year that just ended in June. The FY25 original column is our original FY25 budget. That's the current budget right now that's been adopted. And then the FY25 amended budget is a revised forecast. We'll do an official FY25 amendment in March, but this is what we see are anticipating for that amendment as of right now. So looking at the first line, we have the annual regulatory fee revenue. So that's the main driver of revenues for this department. And so last year we finished the year with 1,428 active permits. So the original budget for FY25, so this current fiscal year, we assumed 1,465 active permits. Lenny did an updated forecast where he looked at the active permits today and then did a forecast on loss. We're revising the forecast upward by 4 permits, so essentially the same level as in the original budget. However, we are increasing the regulatory fee by $15 for NEMs and charters, and $10 for taxi and other vehicles, as you'll see in the new fee schedule. And we'll get to the reason why at the end of the presentation. So for the annual regulatory fee revenue, we were originally projecting $572,000 in the FY25 budget. With the increase in fees, we're projecting just under $595,000, so about a $23,000 increase. Next line here, we have the processing and other fees. That's mostly application revenue. So we, in the original budget, are projecting $185,000. We had a good year last year where we came in at about $218,000. We're not going that aggressive in the budget. And based on the few first months of data that we've seen so far this year, we're actually on a run rate for a little lower than that, but we do think we can hit the $185,000 for the year. So overall, we're now projecting just under 780,000 in operating revenues for FY25. So moving on to the projected expenses for the department. So you can see here, we don't have any changes in the original versus the amended. So we're going to talk about the original assumptions in the FY25 budget just to provide transparency into exactly what's in there. So the major driver of costs for this department is personnel. You can see it makes up most of the budget. So we're projecting 675,000 for FY25. And you can see that's a pretty big jump over FY24, where we finished the year with 564,000. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Biggest driver by far is that we added an additional position. So last year we had 6 full-time employees. This year we budgeted for a 7th, which is a new regulatory inspector supervisor. And then the other piece of that is that it includes wage growth for the existing employees, which is typically 4% per year for MTS employees. And then the healthcare costs generally increase by at least 10% per year. And so that's reflected there as well. Outside services, we're budgeting 27,300. So that includes non-revenue vehicle maintenance, printing costs. We have the RCS radio fees, which is a fee that we pay to the county to access their countywide radio network. And then we always include a $10,000 placeholder for legal services, which is just in case of emergencies. We haven't spent it since I've been here, but we typically leave it in there. You can see last year we only spent 14,000. So the reason it jumps up to 27,000 is really because we have that $10,000 legal budget in there. Next line, we have materials and supplies. We're budgeting $500. Energy, we bumped up to 9,000 this year. Part of that is we are adding an additional non-revenue vehicle to our fleet. We currently have 3, and we're increasing it to 4. And then we also just built in additional usage for in case we drove more miles with the new regulatory inspector supervisor. That's a number that we'll fine tune in the next couple months when we do the actual FY25 amendment as well, because we'll have a few more months of data on that piece. Risk, we're budgeting $9,600. That is for a special liability insurance premium that we have to pay for the for-hire vehicle administration. That's a known number, so there's no uncertainty around that. General and administration costs, we're projecting just under 45,000. This is primarily building rent, which is, I want to say about 30,000. And then it also includes our non-revenue vehicle lease costs, which is our enterprise vehicles that we lease for this department as well. And then the last line on there is the overhead allocation. So that's an allocation of MTS administrative expenses. So we're talking payroll processing, marketing, et cetera. And that gets allocated to different operators based on head count. For-hire vehicle administration only has 7 employees, whereas MTS has over 1,500. So it's a very small sliver, but we do allocate a portion to this department. And so overall, we're projecting just on over 783,000 for FY25. And so here you can see, we talked about revenues, we talked about expenses. So here you can see them combined. When we have a negative number in that third line, we have an operating deficit, meaning we need to cover that deficit with reserves. And so you can see in the original FY25 budget, so our current adopted budget, we were projecting to have an operating deficit of 26,000, meaning 26,000 would need to come from the reserve. Based on the fee increase, which drove the revenue higher in our recent projection, we're projecting only about a $3,500 deficit. So we're tapping the reserves with just a little bit. And so speaking of the contingency reserves, I wanted to give an update. This is the look at just the last couple of years, where we are today and then where we're projected to go at the end of this year. So you can see at the end of fiscal year 23, so just a couple of years ago, we had an audited ending balance of 783,000. Then in FY24, so this last fiscal year, we added 218,000 to the reserves. So currently we have just over $1 million in the reserve, and that's a very high number. It's not a number that we want to increase. But it's not a number that we want to decrease too quickly either. And so we'll get to that on the next slide. And so based on the projected FY25 budget that we just covered, we're projecting to use 3,500 from that in FY25, which would leave us with just under $1 million at the end of FY25. So on this slide, this is a look at last year, the current budget that we just covered, and then a very high level look at the next 4 years as well. And it kind of illustrates why we are recommending the fee increase when the reserve is already by any measurements high. And so first column, that's our actual experience in FY24. You can see there's that just under $1 million. That's our reserve balance today. And then FY25, that's the budget we just covered. And then for FY26 through 29, we make some high level assumptions on what we're expecting. And then we see what that does to the contingency reserve balance. And so for operating revenues, for the projection, we're leaving it exactly where we're projecting for FY25. So same permit volume. And then for illustrative purposes, this is as if we left the fee where it is that we're proposing today. And so no change to this. At this time, we don't foresee any major increases or decreases in the permit volumes. And so that's why we're not making a more detailed projection here. On the expense side, we're assuming 4.8% annual expense growth. That sounds high, but the reason for that is that so much of this budget is made up of personnel costs. And so MTS employees generally receive a 4% merit increase every year. Healthcare costs typically go up by at least 10% per year. And because of those increases making up such a large portion of this budget, that's why we're up around that 4.8% mark. All of the non-personnel items we assume are increasing by 2.5% to 3%. And just keep in mind that these operating expenses don't include any unforeseen things. There's no like software upgrades or anything like this. These are the things that we pretty much can rely that are going to happen. And then so on that third line here, you can see the projected deficit in each of these years. So you can see in FY26, we start with an operating deficit of 40,000. So that would come from the contingency reserve, still a very healthy reserve. We'd be looking at about 957,000 at the end of that year. And then that operating deficit grows by about 40,000 per year. So FY27, we'd be needing to take just under 80,000 from the reserve. FY28, we need to be taking 120,000 from the reserve. And so you can see in those last couple of years, it really starts to dip into the reserves faster. And so just for illustrative purposes, if we were to wait until FY29 and let's say we decided we don't want the reserve to go any lower than where it is at the beginning of FY29, and so we had to make up that $164,000 operating deficit, we would have to increase the regulatory fee by more than $100 per permit, and that's something that we are actively trying to avoid. We had to do that a few years ago. I don't know, it was 3 or 4 years ago. And so that really is our mission, is to smooth this out and really keep up with inflation. However, if we have another really good year in FY25, let's say we end up adding 200,000 to the reserves again, then I don't want to say that we're going to increase the fee again in that case. And so really the point is that we're watching the reserve. We don't want it to get higher than where it is today, but we do want to actively be careful about keeping up with inflation. And we're really trying to avoid that disruptive, significant one-time increase like we've had to do in the past. So we will be looking at this annually going forward as well and coming back with a projected fee based on revised projections. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gordon. Do we have public comment?
Yes, we do. Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
Chair, hi again, Chair. These amounts, MTS is a millionaire right now. The last time this happened in 2016, MTS cut all the annual fees in half. And I'd ask that the chair the CEO do that again. If not, I filed appeal, which would eventually, unfortunately, lead to a lawsuit. I provided a background. Every year, the reserves were around $200,000. So it has gone to $1 million. MTS can cut the annual fee in half for everybody and still have $800,000 in reserves. That's only $200,000 out of $1 million. So MTS has way too much money right now in reserves. It's probably making interest on it. And bringing it down $3,000 to this year is not enough. It needs to come down hundreds of thousands of dollars. The reason I think is because people put 2 or 3 cabs, and you want to ask the reason for the increase. Maybe 2 or 3 cabs, just like when we opened the medallions, we got a lot of annual fees. Unfortunately, the process has changed. We used to have a finance subcommittee, and this used to be an action item. It's only an information item right now. So I'd ask the chair, and tomorrow I'm going to ask the board, and unfortunately, if it goes to a hearing and a lawsuit, to reconsider the fees. The CEO has the power to do it. The process was not followed correctly. An email was supposed to be sent out on the day, according to the code, to everybody, every permit holder. That was not followed correctly. Please re-look at the fees, lower the fees, specifically the change in dispatch fee. I'm going to get to that in the next item. The $60 should be removed for everybody, especially this year, because it's completely unfair to start charging it in November. But as far as the budget, MTS is a millionaire right now, and it's our money. So we need to get that money back sooner than 5 or 10 years, drip by drip. You can easily cut. This is the windfall where all the cabs used to be empty on that street. Now it's filled with taxis. So MTS has got a huge windfall. And I'd ask you're the captain of the ship. Ask the CEO right now through the code changes, maybe because of COVID, it's not going through the normal processes.
Your time has expired.
You have to ask us, not think.
This concludes public comment, Chair. Sorry about that. We do have one more that came in. Alem Zabib. Alem Zabib, please make your way to the podium.
Okay. My name is Alam Zabib. To begin with, good morning to every one of you. I think according to the MTS analysis of the budget, they told us that $1 million reserve, which is a huge number to me. As you all know that we are swallowed and squeezed by Uber and Lyft. In airport, we get only one ride every 4 hours, 5 hours, up 6 hours, sometimes 7 hours. When we come in town, very slim chance. But you still try to increase on the fee on that, which is unhealthy to me. So it should be playing field and cut the price, not to increase about it. And on item 8, I would like to take the opportunity to be specifically from airport to the surrounding environs of the airport up to downtown, probably with the proximity of 4 or 5 miles. It's a good idea to be a flat rate, because I see a lot of drivers, they get angry when they get a short ride after 5 hours sitting, 6 hours, 7 hours. But if it is flat, with no argument about it, no complaining about it, because it is flat for everybody. Beyond that, you can balance up, but it's much better to have a cap on the flat rate within 5-6 miles area. Thank you.
This concludes public comment, Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll begin discussion from our advisory committee members with Mr. Taysom, and then Mr. Zichi, and then Mr. Waisel.
Large problem down here, and it's been going on for years.
Excuse me, Chair, can you unmute his mic? Thank you.
Okay. For years, we've been dealing with the budget issue about up and down, and all that stuff. I would recommend that 6 months from now, we review the budget as a day-to-day expense. And that a report should be sent to all committee members before the meeting so we can look at it and come to the meeting prepared to find out what's going on and not just once a year. Because this is, if we're talking $1 million in reserve, that's fine. I mean, I don't care if it's $500,000 or $1 in the reserve. But I need to know what the money's going to. I think everybody else here wants the same questions answered. I think a 6-month review should be done until we figure out how the expenses are being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tayson. Mr. Zichi?
Yes, the chair is the member of the city council, knew very well that if you folks had this kind of reserves in the city of San Diego, you wouldn't have the problems you have. Very few public agencies carry this percentage of reserves over their annual operating revenue. You might have reserves of 5%, you might have reserves of 10%, but to have reserves of over 100% of your yearly operating revenue is unheard of, I'll bet, in San Diego County. I can't think of any other public agency that I know that would operate with this kind of level of reserves in relation to their operating income. And I can understand that you want healthy reserves, but healthy reserves in excess of your annual operating revenue are unhealthy in the different direction in which the speaker spoke, is that this is driver money that came to allow you to operate. So we've advanced you $1 million to hang on to until you spend it down. So, and don't mean you personally, but I mean MTS. So I would think you have expertise in this as sitting in the city council. Other people in the room have expertise with dealing with their public agencies. I think this kind of fee increase at this time is uncalled for. Just for that very reason nobody needs reserves that high. So I would say I'm opposed to the fee increase this year.
Thank you, Mr. Zichi. Mr. Oysa, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to realize that in the past, our committee has reacted to such a situation as this that we're encountering right now. We have a situation where we're recovering from COVID, cabs are coming back online. So it's surprising that the reserves increase. It's no surprise that they're increasing because the amount of cabs out there are increasing too. So it's not something that you can say, well, where did this come from? If you follow the numbers like they're stating right now, I think we can assess it that our industry is increasing again in numbers. And in the past, we had to vote on a similar situation where our reserves were over the amount that we thought was too much. And I think we're at that situation now. We as a committee can recommend something, but we haven't made any analysis where the accounting department has. They've made an analysis, forecasted it, and they determined, it is an exorbitant amount, so we have to act on the situation. Now, Mr. Hamidi made a comment that we can refund or credit the industry with possibly $100 towards the regulatory fee. That's on the table for us to react on. The chair will obviously have to take our lead, but I think we have to act accordingly based on what we heard in numbers. Now, the reserves, what is the correct amount? We never found out what the correct amount is, but in forecast, as far as if we talk liability issues, we can go upside down again and go backwards. So that's why the accounting department's made its analysis into 2 to 3 years so we can see the reality. And the reality is we're still going to be healthy in 2 to 3 years. So I think we need to act, if we want to, as a committee, an advisory committee, to say what is that amount that we want to credit our industry since the reserves are high, because they are high. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments on this item? Mr. Zichi, you still got your light on. Gordon, if I could ask some questions, I mean, what would be your response to, because I think these are like super fair questions and concerns that are being raised. So do you have a response?
So a couple things that were mentioned, specifically on interest. That is absolutely true that the reserves do generate interest, but all that interest that is generated for this contingency reserves goes right back into it. That was actually why when we originally did this, it was before we had officially closed our year-end books. And then right at the end, before we published all this, we found out that the allocation of interest was actually going to be 100,000. So we got a last minute payment to this reserve and interest of 100,000. And so that it actually looks a little better. I mean, the numbers are reflected here. But I just do want to point out that the interest is going back. And then I 100% agree with the need to define a reserve target. When we first, if you'll remember, I don't remember, it was 4 or 5 years ago, we had to do a dramatic increase to the regulatory fee. We did layoffs. They did a ton of cost cutting to get this budget balance. And so during that time, we were throwing around different reserve targets of 50, 75, 100%. And we never landed on a final number with that. So our CEO, that we actually have direction for next time we do this to come up with a target. And that's something that we all welcome, including me. It makes the calculation on what the fee should be even easier, because we're chasing a real target and not what, we don't want to increase or decrease it. So we're fully agree with the need to define a target. It's just one of the troubles with this department has been how fast it can swing. And that's really kind of unique to this industry, but it does seem like we're on more firm ground now than 8 years ago or so.
So what would be your response to someone who said, why would we raise the fees and get it to such a significant number before we set that target?
So I would say that, like, if you look at the long term, so if we were to not increase the fee now for the next 4 years and you let it get down, let's say, let me go back. So let's say we get through FY28 and let's say we think 84% is a healthy reserve. Just for illustration, it might not be that, it might be lower, it might be higher. And if we didn't want to add or take from the reserve after that, then in FY29, we would have to increase the regulatory fee enough to cover that 164,000 projected deficit. And so in order to do that, we'd have to raise the fees using the fixed number of permits that we're forecasting. We have to raise it by $112. And so it's really, by doing these smaller increases, our attempt was to slow the decrease in the reserve. And so, originally when I did this, I actually recommended no change to the fees. And it wasn't until we did an updated 5-year forecast, okay, well, if we don't look at the next few years and we're only just reacting to this year, everything looks fine. But you don't want to get to a point where you have to do a $100 fee increase, because that, could put people out of business real quick. And so that's the intent. But I think you could absolutely argue that it might be too early to do a fee increase. And I think that's where defining the reserves would really help everyone involved.
Right. I've got a few other folks on the line, so I'll go to them and then I might have some additional questions. Mr. Seifu. Where's Abel? Here we go. I got you.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me this chance. I see that I'm sharing the same opinion like everyone else. We already have a reserve for $1 million, And next year, I see that there is only a 4.8 increase in the projected budget expense. So based on that opinion, I just want to see if we can, MTS recently added a new fee, which is changing the radio service as of November 1st, I believe. So based on this opinion, I want to see if that could be removed and remain the same until maybe next year. So we're going to find out if we're going to need more money by next year. By that time, then we're going to decide if we have to charge an extra radio service fee. So I want to see if that's going to be put as an option. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Majid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question. Did I see anything here for outside legal services?
So within the outside services line, there's 10,000 that is, we include it in the budget every year, but we never spend it, but it's an emergency line item, just in case we get a claim or something like that. So that is inside the outside services line.
But Taxicab administration does use outside legal services, correct?
I haven't seen any expenses on the general ledger, but I'll let Lenny answer that.
Hi, this is Samantha Leslie. Currently, we do not have any outside counsel for Taxicab related items at this time.
Okay, so with all this threats of lawsuits, $10,000, that's quite frankly 4 telephone calls with a decent attorney. So that reserve should be at least a minimum of $250,000. That would be my suggestion.
Mr. Zichi?
Yeah, just responding to that, I think MTS has attorney services, and if the attorney services come out of their budget, I think they can worry about where the 250,000 comes from. It's not going to come from Lenny. I'm wrong? How is that?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's in their budget.
If we have to hire outside counsel for any Taxicab for hire vehicle related item, since we're a cost recovery department, we would have to pay those legal fees
Okay.
out of the department's budget.
Okay. So I'll go back to my original comments on this is number one is, I think there's I reacted to 2 things. One is you do a 5-year projection and it shows a bunch of deficit at the back end. So therefore you got to raise fees now. And I think that's really backwards from not establishing what's a good reserve. I think that's not even the discussion. So even you acknowledge that you have never established. The question is, in your own opinion, given the ups and downs, what's a good percentage? And I would just say that I don't think there's any other public agency that operates in San Diego County that has an excess of 100% reserves. So and even if it's 84, I don't know if there's any public agency in San Diego County that has 84% of its operating costs as a reserve. So I think before we start raising fees, someone's got to do the analysis and say, what do you think is a healthy reserve? And let us look at it and compare it to other people and say, is this in the ballpark? What ballpark is it in? And what contingencies do we have? You're right. I was wrong. We have to have legal fees. So that's an element. But without having anything else to go on, I don't think this board is in a good position to make any recommendation other than keep things the way they are, do the budget work of having a reserve. Everybody's supposed to do this. It's not something that budget people don't do. So come back and tell us what a reasonable reserve is. Tell us why, whether it's legal fees or the ups and downs or anything, and then come back and ask for an opinion on what you should do with fees. But again, I think part of that fee being taken, but because you've extrapolated something that's unknown in the next 5 years, and then on that basis, you want a fee increase now. And I just think many people here have seen that before. It's budget doublespeak, and I'm sad that it's being presented that way. But I think you got to call it for what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Zichi. Mr. Huesa?
So we went around the table with questions, and as an advisory committee, it's up to us to review the facts, make our recommendation. And if so, I mean, we're critiquing the accounting department. They've done their job. And I heard David basically say, what are they doing with the money? We know it's a reserve to cover expenses that might go over the limit of what our taxi industry gets regulated by. So having said that, it sounds like we need to booster up the reserves for legal. Since there's enough money there, we can make a recommendation of increasing the legal reserves and setting the fees at the current level, because they don't need to be increased. Otherwise, we're going to increase the reserves. And look to the future of how what bar are we going to set as far as what should be reserved. So if you guys can come up with an idea and we can move forward with this item, I think that we can be done with this item by making a recommendation. So I'm going to make my own recommendation where we can pretty much put a reserve of 100,000 in the legal fund, leave the fees as they are as this past year, not increase them. And then we as an industry are going to have to react to the coming year as to what we think is going to be the bar that we're going to set for reserves. Because you're going to have another year that comes. We have the possibility within 2029 and the fees reacting to a $450,000 swing in reserve money that's going to be used because we're going to be short. So that's a good offset, meaning it's going to get leveled down eventually through time if we follow the numbers that the county department has stated. So they are some estimates, but they're based on actuary data that has been accumulated through time, so they are real numbers. So that's my recommendation, and if I can get a support on that, we can move forward.
Mr. Tayson.
So this request, I'm also asking that we get a copy of the present budget. All board members should have a copy. I have not seen one. I want to see detailed expense reports for the next fiscal year.
So I want to make sure that the request is totally understood. Are you looking for an accounting of the way things are being spent now, or a detailed accounting of?
Well, he's got
budgeted?
it here budgeted for 2025 of 780, was it $83,000? I want to know how is he spending on them. I was getting that figure. I want to know exactly what those expenses are. Payroll, these vehicles, the whole 9 yards. I mean, this here, he's just telling us what we want to hear. I want to see physical paperwork. I want to see a physical report of the whole thing.
So attachment B that was provided with the agenda item actually shows all of that. It shows the actuals for FY24, and then it shows by individual general ledger code what we're budgeting for FY25, and then what we're also revising. So just that is available here. We can always provide a more detailed like if you want to see a year-end report where we can go and do like a presentation on this.
I want an email of it, all of it.
Well, Mr. Tayson, if it's attached to the materials, I mean, it can be sent via an email, but it's there for the public, for everyone to see, including yourself. I want to make sure we're like really focusing on what the main issue is here. And I think it's totally reasonable to ask for a detailed accounting of what the expenses are and what the expenses are projected to be. Gordon's pointed to where those documents are. We have a responsibility as members of the committee to review those materials, pull them up and look at them. So I just want to acknowledge the work that's been done in advance of the meeting. That doesn't mean that we have to agree with the recommendation. So I think that there's clear concern amongst the group here about the fee increase that's projected as a result of this reserve goal. There's questions as to whether or not that should be the reserve goal. That all seems super clear, and there seems to be clear consensus around. Gordon, mechanically, from a MTS board perspective, can you help folks understand what would be required in order to kind of actualize what the recommendations seem to be here as a committee?
So, so are you talking about not doing a fee increase?
Yeah, if,
So that I'm gonna have to, so my role in it, like, so I do this projection and then we have a discussion.
With
like
who?
So.
Mr. Jason, if you
Lenny,
could let Gordon finish, thanks.
Yeah, so I do an analysis, we come up with a range of options, and then we discuss those, and then we also provide them to the CEO to ultimately make a decision. And so it's really kind of like there's 4 people looking at this. It's not like a decision made in a vacuum.
And then that comes to the board.
No, and I like I said, I think the most valuable thing, like I'm not sure what the process would be, like to not do a fee increase at this point. But in terms of like setting a reserve target and then calculating this, that would be simple. We've done it in the past. I think the main question at that point would be like if we were to set a reserve target, in order to hit a lowered reserve target, would we actually want to do a huge reduction in the fee to get us down to that level? My gut says no, just based on what happened 5 or 6 years ago, and we did that, and then a year or 2 later, we had to increase it to, I think it was $600 and $800 per permit, just insane. So that's really been the only aim from our side, is to avoid that and then try to match the revenue closer to inflation. And so even with this projected FY25 budget, we're still looking at using reserves, but it's so close that, you know, our goal is to slow the usage of reserves, not increase it at all. That's on no one's agenda at all. The only thing we're trying to do is prevent a spike later. But as far as the actual path at this point where we are, I'm gonna have to defer on actually like not increasing the fee at this point.
Right. Lenny, Samantha, do you have anything to add?
In terms of the fee schedule, we do need to post it 30 days before it goes into effect. And so we definitely need to have a clear fee schedule and a decision on the fee 30 days before January 1st. We do have time with the timing of where we're at today at the TAC. If chair is okay with this recommendation, I can take back the feedback we've heard today to our CEO, including keeping the fee at the same rate it is in 2024, as well as this goal of this year coming up with a aim percentage of a reserve for the contingency, and keeping as well, coming back to this TAC to talk about that, what that aim goal is. And we can then again do this 5-year projection, have that goal of the contingency, and decide whether or not we still need to account for increased expenses year after year and how best to do that.
Thank you, Samantha.
And maybe Lenny has a.
Yes, Chair, if I may. And just to add a little bit of historical perspective to what Gordon was saying, many of the members of this committee would remember that back in 2020 and 2021, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, we ended up losing over 200 permits. So that's the main factor that we take into account for the budget forecast. I would like to say that we've been fairly accurate in the last 3 years in our budget projections in terms of how many permits we will renew. But the lesson learned back then, and this committee will remember back in 2021 where the regulatory fee was doubled at $700. That's our goal, and the direction that we have from our CEO is to stabilize the regulatory fee, which, by the way, has been the lowest ever since ever since 2016, which is at $600. I think we need to consider that going forward when considering what the appropriate levels for the reserve should be, because there's many factors. The industry is very volatile. There are many factors here in San Diego that might offset, for whatever reason, aside of a COVID pandemic or something similar, the lack of permit renewals, or in this case, the adding of permits as we have seen in the last 3 years. And as I think Mr. Wesso alluded to as a result of those permits and those drivers that couldn't afford either to renew their permit or the business was not there to support it due to the lack of flights, due to the lack of economic activity. Now it's been recovering, and that is one of the factors that attributed to our healthy level of reserve. So as we move forward at some point to determine what is the appropriate level, it should be noted, very important, that any factor, anything might trigger, mainly the lack of permit renewals, might trigger for the regulatory fee to be raised in the next couple of years. So many factors to consider, but we need to acknowledge that the fee has been stable. This is the first raise and the only change we're making to this annual fee schedule by the lesser amount. But for prior 3 years, it's been stable at 350. It's just that being realistic, taking into account the inflation and everything else that Gordon explained. So just wanted to bring that into perspective to the committee.
Thank you, Lenny.
Sure.
Mr. Ziti, we'll go back to you one last time. You gotta push the button. There we go.
Yeah. I know. Okay, so just to amplify what Tony said, I think we need to come up, it'd be good if we could come up with some coherent advice, which is what we're supposed to doing. So to me, I would element reflecting on what Tony said and what Lenny said is, number one is we would recommend no fee increase at this time. And number two, we would look forward to a discussion at our next TAC about reasonable reserves, taking into account what Tony and Akbar spoke about in terms of legal fees and what you talked about in terms of the volatility of the industry. We can look at our history and we can say, this is what we need for reserves. And I think absent those facts of our history, just clearly in terms of reserves, I think we should we should keep that discussion of the reserves until the next board meeting or the next advisory meeting, and then come up with whatever that number is. So to me, I would reduce it to those two things. Number one, no fee increase. Number two, examine a reasonable reserve level at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ziti. So we've kind of bled into item 5 here. I'm going to do something a little bit unorthodox because I feel like it's hard to put a bow on this conversation without getting into the next one a little bit. We're already doing that. And trying to avoid that seems unnecessarily being unnecessarily strict in a way that doesn't actually help the conversation move along. So if there's any additional public comment on the fee schedule, and then Lenny, if you would like to present on that, and we'll kind of close these out together, if that's all right.
Certainly, Chair, we can do that.
So if you want to talk about fee schedule, then we'll go to public comment on fee schedule, and then we'll put a bow on the conversation on both the budget item and the fee schedule conversation together, because they are both info items. So I feel like we can do that and stay in accordance with the Brown Act.
Thank you, Chair. We can, that being said, we can certainly go through the 2025 fee schedule, which was covering the fact that we must charge fees as a cost recovery operation per Public Utilities Code. We calculate, as Gordon mentioned in his presentation, we calculate these fees every year to recover our expenses. It involves a review of our administrative overhead and other operational costs. Examples of those expenses: salaries, vehicle leases, and maintenance, which are in detail in one of the attachments on the agenda. The only change that we were going to present, we were contemplating in this agenda item, was a slight increase to the regulatory fee, being the only change in the fee schedule by $10 for taxicabs, jitneys, and LSVs, and by $15 for our non-emergency permits. And then also, just to go this on a side item, as a practice, we will mail the invoices by the first day of the year, January 25. The deadline this year will be March 3rd, 2025, similarly as it was to last year, 60 days at the beginning of the year. And we're also going to contemplate that late renewal period fee for permit holders that are unable to meet the original deadline by the end of March 31st. along with $100 late fee to cover those accounting expenses. And as I mentioned, there are no other changes to the fee schedule. And that would conclude this item, Chair.
Thank you, Lenny. Do we have public comment on the fee schedule?
Yes, we do. Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
Chair, everyone's welcome to follow along on SD.Gab. And if you hit on the red announcements button, I put up the fee schedule where fees I'd like to see removed and reduced, if I can have it pulled up. The $60 change of dispatch fee. It's completely unfair that for 10 months it was waived. October 31st, MTS made the calls, and the next day they started charging the fee. That $60 fee has to be removed from everybody. I'd like to ask the chair, they put us in a bad situation here where there's only 1.5 months left before January. But if there's a way to have another meeting, a finance subcommittee meeting, and review the fees, review the budget, if MTS even reduced it $200 for each person, it would still have $800,000 in reserves. The fees, if you can scroll up, the $875 and the $1,500 permit fee, that does not make sense to charge $875 if you transfer or $1,500 for a new one. That needs to be equal. The change of radio service fee, please up more. The $60 change of radio service fee, eliminate that forever. There's a slew of fees in there that I think we need to sit down, like we used to have a finance subcommittee. When I was on this committee, it was a standing committee, and review it. If we can't review it by January 1st, the only choice is the hearing that I filed the appeal. And I don't want those fees to go for attorney's fees, because if we win as the public, that MTS has to pay attorney's fees. So please, if we can set up a meeting before January, they put us in a bad spot, review these fees, review the budget, come back and ask us, get approval, don't dictate to us. Mr. Hueso said, I recommend something, and Mr. Taysom said, I followed that recommendation, but that has no weight anymore because it's an information item. It needs to be an action item. Please stop. So these are unapproved. It was signed on October 24th by the CEO. Please ask us before you sign fees upon us. Lower the fees. Don't even keep them the same. You can afford to lower the fees. Somehow ask us before January 1st or postpone charging us.
Your time has expired. Alem Zabib, please make your way to the podium.
Again, my name is Alem Zabib. Thank you, Chairman. It could be repetitive what I say earlier. It is actually, you told us right on the face that you have a healthy reserve, which is $1 million plus. And we are here squeezed every day, as I said it earlier. We get one ride every 4 hours, every 5 hours, every 6 hours, sometimes 7 hours. If you take the average 5 hours. In a city, it's almost none, I can say, because it is swallowed by Uber and Lyft. So where do you draw the line that you're going to increase the fee, which is unbelievable and unmatched? And on the other side, I don't get it why you are incorporated Uber with a taxi. That is a puzzling question for me. Because by doing that, slowly you're killing the taxi business. That's the bottom line about it, the way I understood it, because we are on the extinction, I would say. So think about it. And as I said earlier, a flat rate is much playing field for all taxi drivers within a proximity of 5-6 miles. It could be resolved with anguish and complaining about the drivers, which I can feel it. They're sitting there 5 hours, 6 hours, and nobody give a damn what we are going through. So if it is flat rate, it is equally playing field for everybody. Thank you.
Abdul Salam Abdi Kadir, please make your way to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Abdul Qadir Abdul Salam. What I want to make a comment about is the fees that we're talking about. I got a call yesterday in regards to the $60 fee that a driver that leaves a radio service to another radio service will be charged. That fee has been waived for the last 10 months, as I understood it. And I believe that it's unfair to those drivers that are going to be coming on and trying to move around from radio service to radio service if they don't like the radio service that they work with. And if that can be waived and eventually if we can get rid of that fee, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, the flat rate, I see that on the item, it says that there was a review or a research that was done. I have no clue about that research. We never got an email about any research being done about a flat rate from the airport to the surrounding neighborhoods, to the areas like either Mission Hills or let's say Point Loma or the airport, downtown. I think talking to the drivers that we work with, they always tell us flat rates are actually something that they would love to have. If we need to do a research, if we need to work with MTS, however that can be done, we'll be open to do that. And that's my comment. Thank you very much.
William Alozzi, please make your way to the podium.
Folks, as you're making your way up, I just want to remind people that there will be the agenda item. Just hold on one second. Agenda item 6 is on the flat rate. So I want to make sure that folks know they'll have an opportunity to speak specifically to that later. Right now, comments should be about the fees. We've got some space for comments about the budget, but let's keep it on those two topics. Go ahead, sir, please proceed.
Jose, I'm actually interested in opposing the motion, which is in respect to the fees. Just like the previous speaker said, the $60 fee to the taxi drivers, I believe is unfair, and if it's within the powers of this body, you should please mandate MTS to retrieve that. Listen to the budget here. We're talking about the fact that cost of things, cost of living for the cost of operations or cost of maintenance for MTS. So what about the taxi driver who's taking this hit? Okay, the sustenance of MTS is on the back of these taxi drivers. Okay, if you're feeling the pinch as a body, then how is the life of this common man on the street? So that's part of the things we have to take into consideration. We can't just come out here, okay, we have to overbloat our budget or something like that. We have a surplus reserve. This surplus reserve is from the back of these body gentlemen and ladies, most of them of which are working and they can't stand by themselves now, having worked on this business for 20 or 15 years time. And there is no insurance, there's no life after they retire from this service. We can't continue sucking life out of these people. Thank you.
Fauzi Noor, please make your way to the podium.
Oh, you got to press first. Mr. Chairman, I want to reiterate about the budget. You know, there is a famous quote by a U.S. Senator, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, pretty much you're talking about millions. I'm asking the budget director, whatever his name is, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Is there an outside company you guys use, like Big Four, to see the projections that he's talking about? For us drivers here, what we are talking about is only how we gonna survive the next day. And excuse me, and the problem we have is that there is a competition. And this budget looks like back in 2000, where you can always add. So since this is a public company, did they ever thought about running as a lean corporation? And secondly, how about our competitors? Our competitors, they don't have to face all these fees, and which I think is arbitrary. they don't get our input. And if they had, you know, if I get all this information beforehand, I would have had more prepared to talk about it. And and the about the flat rate should be okay with the drivers. But main thing is that these arbitrary rates, like if you are late, you will be charged $100. You know, it's not something that we can always get that extra $100 to pay for being late. You know, and I think we have to be always in having in our heads that our competitors, Uber and Lyft, they don't.
Your time has expired. This concludes public comment, Chair.
All right, so we'll open it up for discussion on our fee schedule. I'll just kind of get things going by saying I hear everyone on your concerns about additional costs. The cost of living in San Diego is way too high for way too many people. I know that threatens your ability not just to stay here, but you know, to keep a roof over your head. And so that's very, very real to me. I think it's a fair question to ask of, you know, what are we doing as an agency to keep costs down for drivers? I will also say that, and this is there, I wish that I had a solution to this. Those of you who've made comments about there being competition, and I think we're talking about Uber and Lyft specifically here. They're on a different playing field. They're not under the same regulatory structure that we are. The mandates around being a cost recovery, around cost recovery aren't the same. They're essentially playing with fake money, where they don't even have to turn a profit for a very long time because it's just a different game that's being played. And that's not fair to any driver, for sure. It's not fair to the taxicab industry. It's not particularly fair to MTS. So I just want to acknowledge all of that. I think that those are all really fair frustrations and concerns. I feel those as well. We can't solve for all of them here. Wish we could. It would be a very powerful advisory committee if we could solve for all of them. But that doesn't mean that we can't hear the concerns, and then, you know, that I can't do what I can to try to take action as a MTS board member, and that MTS staff can't hear it and then try to incorporate it into the decisions that are made. So I just wanted to acknowledge that part before we open it up to advisory committee member comments specifically related to the fee schedule or any additional comments related to the budget that was presented. Mr. Wayson.
Well, I go back to what I stated, but I also see that the items that we're discussing, 4 and 5, are informational, but that doesn't preclude us from making our recommendations. So I'm reinstating my recommendation and including that we put a budget for that clock to be adjusted, so we can keep a sense of time. So if we can have some support on that, we can move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hueso. Any additional questions or comments related to the fee schedule or budget? Lenny, please.
Chair, with your permission, I think this is the proper time to provide a little bit more of context about this dispatch service change fee, because I think it's grossly been misrepresented as far as being an onerous fee, and I would like to provide the committee with a detailed explanation on the effort that goes behind processing dispatch service requests. So ever since we revised our ordinance to modernize dispatch services, there's been, we processed as of the beginning of this fiscal year, over 200 dispatch service requests, which we waived as, you know, the deadline was October 31st. The year prior, we processed only under 40 people who decided to change the dispatch services. So just last week, we've had a handful, if not more than 10, and I can certainly quantify that, of permit holders who change dispatch service 5 times in a week. And that's obviously, that's ridiculous. But when I personally asked these permit holders, and there's been an aggressive marketing on behalf of some of these dispatch services that are promising various fees or various issues that we certainly do not get into. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if there is an administrative review, data entry, on visual inspection that needs to go along, labor costs, scheduling, processing of payment. So this fee is not an arbitrary fee. We believe, based on our experience and based on the labor that goes into it, that it is proper. I just want to bring that to the committee because it is an average of 40 minutes for the entire process to be adjudicated from the moment that the permit holder requests to change their dispatch service, for us to input it and for us to make sure that everything has concluded. And again, I don't expect this to stop. I get calls constantly to my office asking me if they should change, if what this particular dispatch service is telling them it's true. And a lot of times there's been a lot of deceptions there. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I stand ready to provide each member of this committee or member of the public with a detailed explanation on our administrative review and all the efforts that go along with that dispatch service change. Just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Lenny.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes, the fee schedule introduces it looks like a new waiver for wheelchair vehicle accessible vehicles. That appears to be new for this year. Is there something that this committee has want to work with the airport on? I recall seeing a study that in part of reducing the MTS fees for vehicles, wheelchair accessible vehicles, excuse me for the acronyms, MTS will be introducing that in the fee schedule. But are there anything that this committee recommends the airport do to support that goal?
Mr. Anderson, I look forward to having an extensive conversation with you on many incentives that other cities provide. In what we decided at this point, and even this last year, this is not a new item, is to not only reduce the fares, but waive them completely for our existing wheelchair accessible vehicles. That way, we're sure that the existing amount, which was 7 last year, now we're up to 8, that they remain in service. And we're also waiving the fees of any other permit holder that wishes to come into business with wheelchair accessible vehicles as an incentive for them to increase the number of wheelchair accessible vehicles in San Diego and all the cities that we regulate. So the airport, obviously, you are one of our largest stakeholders for that matter. We're also working with San Diego Sheriff's Department, see what waivers or what incentives they can provide for us, and also with San Diego County Weights and Measures. So all our partner agencies that have a stake in taxicab regulations, we're all working together to see how we can better incentivize not only maintaining the current number of permits, but also facilitating the market entry of all those new permits. That way we can have a healthy amount of wheelchair accessible vehicles in San Diego. So I take you up on that, and I certainly look forward to speaking to you and analyze what can the airport do in partnership with all the other agencies that I mentioned to make sure, and also, of course, our drivers and current permit holders to see how we can better incentivize those permits.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Seifa.
Mr. Fuel, as you say, there is a lot of drivers changing radio service in the last time, like 5 times within a short period of time. So the only issue that we have seen in the past was there was a lot of drivers who has an Uber account and pending approval. They were not really meaning that they were not approved. They're still in the process of getting approved. So we don't know what's the final outcome. And these drivers will take sometimes some months or 2 weeks to get a response from Uber. And then once they get this approval, then they want to join the radio service, especially Flywheel now. So is there maybe give them some time to see until they get the final approval by Uber, then you guys gonna finalize their paperwork. That's the only issue that I see because they're gonna join Flywheel and it will take them some time and then Uber gonna respond back to them and they, hey, you're not gonna be approved, you're not gonna be on our platform. Then they're gonna wanna go back to their old radio service. So is there some kind of things that you could be more flexible with these drivers so they could switch back to their old radio service if that could be an option? Otherwise, you're gonna have a lot of drivers going back and forth. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Safo, for providing a brief explanation. I believe I know what you're talking about in terms of Flywheel and some other dispatch services that are able to work with Uber in this case. We don't, that's not our role as a regulator. No, there's no regulator that in California that I know that gets into the particular business operations of each dispatch service. So we have a baseline of what we require. That's in the ordinance, and that's our limitations. We have 11 dispatch services in San Diego, and each one of them has different rates. This is different subscription prices, different clauses, different operations. We just can't do that. So it is up to each permit holder to get the proper information from that dispatch service. Unfortunately, based on permit holders' accounts, sometimes they don't get actual information, or they get false promises, or many issues that, again, and just to cite a few, people who are charging a year in advance, people who are making them sign contracts. And I'm going to say people, I'm talking about the dispatch services. It's up to the driver. There are solutions, and I stand ready to provide them, in perspective and in comparison to some other cities. Consolidating technology. Other cities don't have this problem. However, given the current state of the dispatch service industry, and with 11 of them, that's what creates this, the competition between them, the aggressive marketing tactics, and the confusion that they create with drivers when it comes to their own marketing promises and prices, which for the record, we don't get involved in that. So again, it's an issue that we need to contemplate. We need to take that into account, and it relates directly to this dispatch service fee that our department charges in order to process those dispatch service changes.
Chair, we can't hear.
Mr. Seifu, can you push your button so I can?
So my question is, can you give them some time to finalize their paperwork and their accounts with Uber or Flywheel before you guys are going to charge them?
I have the
That's my
perfect
question.
solution. I have a perfect practical solution. If the practical and most logical solution is for the driver to finish up that process, and when that process is ready, they can come to us and we're ready to get them with the final inspection within 48 hours. I think that makes sense. So if
Because
there's
what I heard is they get a call right away from MTS to do inspection.
correct,
Right, so-
yes,
Yeah.
yes, correct. That is the process because
So,
we want
but
to.
you see, the thing is that then Uber has their own time processing their paperwork.
Yeah, Mr. Seifu, I think what Lenny's saying is that the driver should wait until that process is complete before they make the
Correct.
call to MTS. MTS is providing quality service by responding so quickly so that there isn't a lag time between when that person is approved and wants to make the change, that they're not left waiting for MTS.
That is correct.
So I think what you'd end up having is more people waiting longer. If rather than putting it on the individual driver to wait for that process to be complete, to know that they want to make that shift before they request the change from MTS. I'm going to move on to Mr. Waso.
Thank you, Chair. I think on this issue, I'm just going to add something to the equation because it is very important. Even the comments you hear in complaints, that people don't read the fine print, they don't read some things, they don't sign when they sign their contracts, you got to read the information. When you enter any agreement, you got to read the information. And that's the problem we're having in our industry. People that don't command the English language or that have issues with technology, they depend on somebody else and they're given false information or misleading information. And at the end, they should get somebody to help them with the agreement. We've been willing to help a lot of members, whether it's the airport, whether it's the city or the MTS, because we find that there is a need to help people understand what agreement they're entering in. I mean, MTS sends guidelines and parameters, and I still hear complaints that they don't understand. Like some people followed the lead past 3 years on the rates of fare. Nobody ever forced anybody to change their rates of fare, yet people followed the lead thinking that it had to be done. So I think we in the industry and also as regulators and whatever agency we represent, we have to help those that don't understand it, and those that don't understand it need to reach out to somebody that knows the information rather than being misrepresented. So I'm just adding that to the equation because it is important and it is a big problem. Not only the MTS, not only the city of San Diego, at the sheriff's department, everybody has this issue under putting policies to engage in such a way where they don't have to have so much dialogue and hours invested on somebody that doesn't understand a contract. So I think we all have to make an effort to better that because a lot of this that what I'm hearing is miscommunication, misunderstanding, and that's why people are reacting in a very exaggerated manner. They're not reading the fine print. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hueso. Lenny, Samantha, thank you for the work on this. Appreciate the committee's participation in the conversation. So it's 2:30 and we've got a number of things left here. So we're going to try to manage our time. Lenny, how long do you anticipate for the flat rate presentation and conversation?
Chair, on the flat rate, we're planning, I can advance the presentation by saying that we will follow through with this with a working group committee to determine the best proper way to pursue this and continue analyzing this. So I can speak through that presentation if there's any a side of the public comment that might be available.
Okay, so what is there more than that, or was that pretty much it?
I think it's a relatively brief agenda item.
Okay.
And we can even waive the presentation if it seems like it was pretty clearly described in the agenda item. We could just talk to public comment or committee member comments or questions.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. So we'll move to item 6, waive the presentation, see if there's public comment, and then open it up to questions. I do want to make sure we get to 7 because I think, it's important. That's an important update, and the group should hear what you all have been working on. Is there any public comment?
Yes, Chair, we have 5 public comments. Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
The flat rates we have been in support of for a long time. We've been waiting since May. That's when we had the ad hoc committee. Lenny did an excellent presentation, the best I've seen in 20 years on flat rates. But again, it goes back to when you were ready, people need to have the freedom to change without a penalty of $60 for the change of radio service fee. I can attest to the fact that many of the people who've switched to airport dispatch were not inspected. And that process of inspecting and that cost was not done. Furthermore, even if there is a cost, we have $1 million in reserves. So $60 is not that much. It would be just like, and this is related to flat rates. So when it comes, we want to be ready. If the DMV had waived the DMV annual fee or the DMV fee for everyone with tags from January to October, and then they only charge people with tags of November and December, that would be unfair. That'd be a tax. The same thing, October 31st is completely arbitrary. It was first supposed to be June 30th, which was the end of the fiscal year. Somehow, again, this is why there's too much power at upper management. It needs to come back to us as a finance subcommittee, as a committee. Somehow it got extended to the arbitrary date of October 31st. Calls were made on that day, and the next day the fee was there. So flat rates we want to do, but we need to be able to have the freedom to switch between dispatches that provide a flat rate. Airport dispatch does. It's ready to go since June, or actually since, let's say, August. But we've been way behind on flat rates. We thought that flat rates would have been approved by this meeting, so we could have had the change of radio service without the $60 fee and be ready to go by January. So we're really lagging on flat rates. Everyone's in support of it. It would help the airport rides, especially for the short trips and the passengers. Thank you.
William Alozi, please make your way to the podium.
Yeah, good afternoon again. I'm here to speak in support of the flat rate for calls, rice originating from the airport. I think this issue has been long overdue. Before the COVID, I think there was a discussion on this particular issue, and erroneously, just like Mr. Hueso pointed out, most of the operators that informed or formed majority of the populace, the cab driving business, were conspicuously misled into jumping up the meter. And by the time the meter was jumped, the information was all over the media, which evidently led to the death of our business. As at this very moment, drivers sit at the airport 7 hours plus, and you get a fare to Sheraton Marina. This is a gentleman who has families to take care of. So Denver, Minnesota, and even LAX, some radio services has flat rates. So if this organization, this body should consider that as an option for the drivers, it will go a long way. And the issue of radio services, if MTS as a body should help us create much of a uniformity by controlling activities of most of all these radio services, there wouldn't be much of this misinformation that is leading some of our drivers astray.
Henry Ago, please make your way to the podium.
Good afternoon, board members, and good afternoon, everybody. This flat rate issue, I think, is something that this body need to do something about it as soon as possible. MTS in other areas, they emulate people like Seattle, Washington, Minnesota, LAS in other regulatory matters. How come they can't do this as soon as possible? If you go to Seattle, Washington, from the airport to business district, there is flat rate. You go to Minnesota, there is flat rate. You go to LAS here, there is flat rate. Why, how, or why is it a problem for us to copy if we emulate them in other regulatory issues? It's even when they increase our meter, that's not the solution to our problems. It's not a solution. Because when you, as a young man, you take taxi from the airport to a PB to Pacific Beach, you will not want to come back again and take taxi. And most of the rides we get from airport there to downtown, Abo Island, Point Loma, they are all more than 80% of our business. From Terminal 1 to Sheraton, it's $14 after 5 to 6 hours wait time. So please, it's about time you guys do something about this to help the common man that is out there doing this job. Help us with this flat rate. It's done in other neighborhood airports. Thank you.
Osman Ibrahim, please make your way to the podium.
Good afternoon, Chair. And for us, for taxi driver, actually, we are really struggling. We wait like more than 4 or 5 hours to get fare. Not only at the airport, sometimes we stay by all the hotel, we'll be outside And for the airports, like the airport, they did the new dispatch is good for the driver. Like with the new dispatch system, we can see how many cabins at the terminal and how many like waiting time, all the summary, but still is not really enough for driver after 4 or 5 hours to get like not only Sheraton, sometimes Liberty Station, or like 2-3 miles around the airports. And same what my friends say, 80% from our business from the airports is almost to downtown and Sheraton. We support to get a flat rate like another city. That be enough for the driver, at least for his 4 or 5 hour waiting time. Thank you.
Fozzie Noor, please make your way to the podium. Chair, concludes public comment.
All right. Thank you so much. So with recognition that it's 2:42 now, and how are we doing on quorum? What's what?
What's the quorum number? How many do we need to have? 10?
9.
Nine.
Yeah, so we've lost quorum. Okay.
But we can still, we're not taking any action on
Yeah.
these items, so we can still work through
Yep.
them.
So do we have any questions? With, again, recognition that there's going to be additional conversation outside of this forum. Any questions that feel like they need to be asked and answered here? Mr. Banks?
Flat rate is just some. This now relate to the flat rate. This relate to the radio service and Uber and Lyft. It look like Uber.
Mr. Banks, if I'm going to ask that you hold on to it then.
Huh?
If it's not related to the flat rate, then I'm going to ask that you hold on to your comment for now.
You got it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
I don't see any additional requests to agenda item 8. Lenny, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8 will cover the Wildcatter Public Safety Awareness Campaign update. Dating back to October 18th, in collaboration with the San Diego District Attorney, MTS Marketing launched the Public Safety Awareness Campaign against wildcatting. The purpose of this campaign was to warn the public about the dangers of utilizing non-permitting passenger transportation, otherwise known as wildcatters. This public safety awareness campaign included both printed and digital assets, posters, billboards, and also on the MTS website and social media content. We did launch an informational page on the MTS website. We invite you to visit it, titled "Don't Risk Your Safety and Say No to Wildcatters." This website provides information on the dangers of riding with wildcatters, safe for hire transportation options at their border areas, and how to identify a licensed taxi cab and how to report wildcatting activity. And it's both available. The information is available in both English and Spanish. This is an example of the public safety awareness media campaign in Spanish, no viajes con raiteros, and don't travel with wildcatters. It's illegal and it's not safe. We also launched a billboard advertisement, in this case through digital means, in the San Isidro area in Camino de la Plaza and Virginia Avenue, also inside the Las Americas Outlet Center. In solid billboards, also in the San Isidro area and the 100 block at Via de San Isidro, and also on both sides of the freeway, northbound and southbound. That image to your right is the one from that could be seen from I-Found southbound. Also at the 700 block of Via de San Isidro, And that is the one that can be seen going northbound on the freeway. The next steps, we will work with the city, with the City of San Diego on installation of signage at specific location for enforcement purposes. We will continue to work with the San Diego District Attorney, the Police Department, the San Diego Sheriffs, the Public Utilities Commission on the best enforcement practices targeting wildcatting. And we will work with our taxi cab drivers on possible solutions to discourage and inhibit wildcatting in San Isidro and Old Time Mesa areas. And I should have begun by saying that this morning we had a press conference at the San Isidro Port of Entry with our public officials, and the media was there, obviously, and many of our taxi drivers took place there. And we see this as an ongoing effort. We want to make it sustainable, and we want to keep an eye out to mitigate this problem. That being said, I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Lenny.
On that item.
And let me start by thanking you, Samantha, everyone from the MTS team for planning and coordinating this. I know Julio from my office sat in multiple meetings with you all, planning for those meetings, and then in those meetings to coordinate with law enforcement, industry stakeholders, Assemblymember Alvarez, Councilmember Moreno. They played a very important role. And the last thing I want to say, you know, we've had info items. There's been frustration that there's info items, and that we're not seeing more action more quickly. This is a tangible example of the concerns expressed here in this forum being acted upon in a very real way. Hours and hours and hours of work went into not just the press conference this morning, but all of the action that's going to follow. And so I say that not to be defensive, but to demonstrate that when issues are raised here, and it's done in an effort to move us forward in a positive direction, that gives Lenny, Samantha, and MTS team something to work with, and they're very good at doing that. And so again, I want to just say thank you to both of you for the work that went into it, and then thank you to the folks here, both on the committee and the members of the public, for raising the issue, bringing it to our attention so that we can take real action. So thank you for all of that. Do we have any public comment? If so, we will limit public comment for this item to 1 minute, given where we're at with respect to time.
Yes, we do. We have two commenters. Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
I asked for the SD.cab announcements to come up. It's the red button on this www.sd.cab. At the bottom, there's a page where the federal police came to Otay, and they it looked like they were ticketing Raiteros there. We need the city police to come and do towing. Even just 1 day of towing would help us send out the message. It was excellent. I spoke with the district attorney today. The chair, Whitburn, I spoke with him today, and it was fantastic. Thanks to Laura, who's here, who did a great job. And again, it started here with you. Thank you for your leadership and just hearing us out and listening. That's why we're looking forward to the fees, the same thing in the budget. If you go all the way to the bottom, everyone can see the picture of this was the federal police. If you go up, if you other way, if you can go up, please. This is the federal police. Right there, stop. The federal police came, and we need the city police to do the same. This morning, district attorney said that she's going to talk to the chief.
Your time has expired. Jose Jaime Mejia, please make your way to the podium.
Wildcatters have been going on for 4 decades. And finally, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are so faithful that all these people show up in the morning. And I mean, we're so grateful for that. So I just say thank you for all.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll begin the committee's conversation with Mr. Zici.
Can you please turn your mic on? Thank you.
He has to, yeah.
You
I just
should
wanted to
get
say my thanks, but I think that we're going to see, if I can predict the future, we're going to see ebbs and flows in enforcement. And so one of the things I'd like to see in the future is some reasonable discussion with the DA's office about how taxi drivers can help with enforcement in safe and reasonable ways. It can be really tough down there, so I don't think anybody should be naive. But I think there's not always going to be enforcement there, but there are taxi cabs there. And if there's a way in which we can figure out how to be part of the enforcement through information and pictures and whatever, I think we'd welcome it. So I would offer our industry as part of the enforcement, if there's ways in which we can do that, supplying evidence or information or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zici. Mr. Huesa, you'd had your light on.
I think you recognize some public officials that were instrumental in having today's demonstration or hearing or public statements. I think it's important to realize that the gentleman that just spoke stated that they've been waiting for decades for this. And then there's been a lot of people that have invested their life and blood into this to try to get this on the agenda. It's been placed before as an item to take care of. The police used to enforce part of this, and they dropped the ball. And it became an issue thrown back to blaming other government departments that there wasn't the funds or the resources to fight it. It's going to take a lot of resources because it's something that's done behind the scenes. And when you finger something, you're going to review the credibility of the person stating it to try to justify the actions that are going to have to take place. So what I'm trying to say is hopefully we can go forward, like Peter said, and get this resolved, because it has been a pressing problem. Then not only has it hurt people economically or customers in an indirect way that we don't know the collateral damage that it's caused, but it's been an ongoing item that numerous drivers, I can't mention the amount of names because there were so many people involved that formed committees, that formed meetings, invited police, everybody did their part to try to get this. And here it is before us again, and hopefully we can stick together and collaborate collectively to make it succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hueso. All right, I don't see any additional requests to speak to this item. I'll just say thank you again. Again, a lot of work went into that, and obviously, one day an announcement doesn't make it a success. The billboards don't make it a success. But I do think that the collaboration that's taken place up to this point is a very good indicator of the seriousness of with which the issue is being taken, and the multiple agencies that are playing a role in this, including the city, multiple council members, and the police department was there this morning. So I'm not quite sure why we're not recognizing that the city is playing an important role in this as well. I shouldn't say that. Well, some folks aren't. With that, we are pretty close to time. Lenny, I'll turn to you and kind of give you an opportunity to figure out what in agenda items 8 and 9 in particular you want to cover, if anything, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Chair. First, thank you and the committee members and members of the public for your kind words on this wildcatting effort. We'll make sure that it's sustainable and to corroborate, to extend our corroboration with all the stakeholders. So our item on our administration updates, I invite the committee members and members of the public to visit our website. It is posted, and it just covers our usual notifications. It has our contact information, including our new regulatory supervisor, and kind of like the roles that we're involved in and our contact information. You can reach us by phone number, by email. We will return your email, your phone call within the next business day. We're also covering, again, the deadlines for the regulatory fee. Similarly to last year, invoices will be sent. I cannot emphasize this enough. Please look at your inboxes. That's our main method of communication with our permit holders for every type of communication. In this case, the invoices for your annual regulatory fee will be sent by January 1st. And the deadline will be, as we covered, by March 3rd. We will be collecting fees as we did last year conveniently for all our permit holders at the airport holding lot. Our inspectors will also be able to collect the fees in several sites like the Otay border, San Isidro, or our office in our mail drop box. We will, as I spoke earlier, we will conduct future working groups with the committee and everybody that's interested on airport rates for our flat rates for airport originated trips. We're also conducting a working group with our non-emergency medical permits, which comprise a large segment of our revenue and the permits that we issue. We will also convene a working group for revisions to our for-hire vehicle administration training course for all new drivers. And I look forward to your expertise and feedback to come up with the best training program that we can, and also contemplating the creation of a driver recognition program for our outstanding drivers that go beyond in their customer service skills as ambassadors for the city. And then again, these are the usual numbers that we provide with as far as our statistics. We are at an all-time high level of permits that we've issued. As a result of that, we have, as we covered earlier, our healthy finances. But it should be noted, 1,630 first permit as of a couple of weeks ago. That's the highest number that we've ever been with. And our statistics with enforcement and detailed granular information on the type of warnings and field reports that we issue. Also on the customer feedback cases, the only graph that we'd like to go up is the second to the right, the compliments. But we keep close details on the types of complaints or customer service feedback cases that we receive and we investigate. I invite the committee again to take a look at them at their own time. And finally, the airport trips. Thank you to Mr. Anderson and Ms. Cole for providing us with that information on a timely matter to present it to this committee and also our monthly reports. That concludes the for-hire administration operations update, Chair.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Banks.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to talk about the radio service issue. I think look like MTS more focused on Uber and Lyft and looking like neglecting the taxi industry, because I know a lot of senior citizens. I know MTS provides free ride for senior centers sometimes, but it's not enough for the people who don't want to. The people who don't want to take Uber and Lyft, those old people, they prefer the taxi no matter what, because they feel when they have their credit card for Uber, they may turn around, use it again, over they are afraid to learn how to use Uber and Lyft. So if they keep on driving away some radio service to prefer them, making it easy for Uber and Lyft to control the system would be a big problem for the senior people that use Uber and Lyft. So I think we have to consider of allow the taxi and radio service to be doing their thing rather than putting them out of service.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Thank you.
All right. Was there any public comment on this item or
Yes,
these
we have-
items? We'll hear the public comment together for the
Okay.
two items.
Yes. Kamran Hamidi, please make your way to the podium.
Just as we switch to flat rates, and right now, a lot of people switching to picking up TNC rides, if we can have a meeting in the future, I think something pretty serious has been overlooked, which was the insurance. We're all on the same island right now. I think there's only one insurance company in San Diego, and it would be genius for Uber to shift all the risk from the accidents to our one insurance. And if we leave that, if we lose that insurance, everyone's on the same island. We're all out of business. So we need to look at that. I looked at the TNC requirements and I think it was $1 million. Maybe find a second insurance company, but insurance is key and crucial to our business. And it happened before in the 90s. Hundreds and hundreds of taxis were put out of business in one day because of lack of insurance. So we need to look at, as we're shifting to Uber rides and TNC rides, are they shifting the risk to our insurance? And
Your time has expired. Alam Zabib, please make your way to the podium. Thank you. William Alozi, please make your way to the podium.
For the time. Just like he said, I was actually trying to say something about the insurance. For the years, we've had the insurance on the taxi cab industry at the higher rate it was. And the information being the fact that we have less number of cabs and the risk involved is enormous for the insurance companies. As at this very point in time, the taxi cab numbers you could see is way too high. Why do we still have the high rate of insurance? If I go out there and buy a Tesla today, regardless of my drunk driving record, I don't get to pay the same insurance as a taxi cab driver. Secondly, I appreciate your giving us information about your website, and I will encourage the members we have here. You guys are representing the taxi cab industries. If you can give the information to members, over 80 to 75.
Your time has expired. That concludes public comment, Chair.
All right, thank you so much. So we are at the end of our time here. We don't know when our next meeting will be. It will be in 2025. That we do know. And I think what I would say in terms of we've got a lot to chew on based on the conversation we had here today. I'll get together with Lenny and Samantha and make sure that the conversations today are incorporated into our planning for not just the next meeting, but the meetings we plan on having in 2025. If I'm afforded the opportunity to continue to serve in this role. Lenny, I'll toss back to you to see if you have any concluding remarks before we wrap things up.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just with under a minute, the next topics for the next Taxi Cab Advisory Committee, like we always do, the calculations of the maximum rates of fare, continuing research for the airport originated trips, Wildcatter public safety awareness campaign update, see where that's going by that time, and our traditional for hire vehicle administration update. Please reach out to me directly if you have any topics that you would like to include in the next agenda. And I look forward to meeting with members of the committee and the public on some of these upcoming working groups. That way we can provide the best, most practical solution for both drivers and consumers and get to the root of the problem, in this case for the flat rates and in a couple of the other items that I discussed in the previous item as far as the working group meetings that we will have. That would conclude this, the last agenda item, Chair.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.